Hi chess fans, in this video we will look at what white setups are available that are easy to play and safe to play if you're playing white against the Sicilian. So after e4, c5 we have reached the Sicilian, and after knight f3 the first system is the d6 systems, in which case we want to play d4, and after c takes, knight f6, knight c3. There are four different systems here that black can play. One is the dragon after g6, and what we want to play is the Yugoslav attack against the dragon. So basically after knight e3, bishop e3, bishop g7, we want to play f3, knight c6, queen d2, and after Keres we want to play bishop c4 to prevent the d5 push, and after bishop d7 we want to castle long, and then the game continues like this. White can play bishop b3 and king b1, and once everything is ready we just attack with the pawns. And this is very easy to play because you've got the battery here against the king. You can push the pawns forward. At the same time your king is safe, and it takes a little while until black develops play. So the Yugoslav attack against the dragon is a very safe choice. If black does not play the dragon, black can play the classical system with knight c6. And in this case we want to play the Richter-Rauser attack after bishop g5, e6, queen d2, bishop b7, long castle, short castle, f4, knight takes, queen takes. We have a situation where again we castled long, and we have some good play against the king, against the king with all of our pieces. After e6 we want to play the Keres attack, which starts with g4, and the idea is to play rook g1, push this pawn forward, and then at some point play bishop to c3, queen to d2, and long castle. And this bishop here can go into the attack as well, has different options. So that's the basic idea. And black wants to, because white threatens immediately g4, so black wants to play h6, h4, knight c6, rook g1. And here most players are already not going to know the best move, which is h5. But maybe they're going to play d5, or even moving the knight back to safety, which gives you an immediate advantage. So for example, after d5, the basic idea is that we want to castle long and exchange a lot of pieces, and then end up in a slightly better ending. The best move here, however, is h5, and after this move we want to take g-take. We want to play g-takes. We don't want to push forward, because that gives black some counterplay here. In this position here, the knight has some good squares, and black also has some attack here on the diagonal. So in this position it's important to know that we want to take, and after knight takes, bishop g5. The point is that whenever black plays f6, we just move the bishop back, and this knight is really bad, and we will castle long and have a good play. So we can play g takes h and then play the bishop here, because basically it's gonna stay there and we will have a nice play. So against the Scheveningen system we want to play the Keres attack, and then the last and most important opening in the d6 systems is of course Najdorf attack, and here we want to play the English attack after bishop e3, e5. We want to go into a setup where we castle long. Again, we have this battery here, and we have these pawns here to attack. So for example, the game could continue like this, and this is a pretty solid opening that you can play against other black setups. For example, after e6 you can just play the same or similar thing. And if black wants to prevent this, he can play knight g4 here, but then we reach a position like this. So basically what you should remember is to play bishop g5 here, and then the best is that this bishop is pushed away, and we push the knight away, and then this is a position that can arise from there. Okay, if in this position black does not play d6, as we have seen, but instead plays e6, we have a number of systems here. The first system, or generally we want to play d4, c takes, knight takes, and then in this position here, black can play knight c6, the Taimanov. And what we want to play here is the Karpov attack, bishop b5, and the point is that black really wants to play d6 here, and then we can play c4. And the point is that black has played e6, and in the Scheveningen system the pawn would be here, giving the knight access to this nice square on d4. But because this pawn is on e6, we can afford to play c4 instead of c3, which would be needed to control this square, because the knight cannot move here. So that's basically why the Karpov attack is an improvement on the Scheveningen attack. And after knight f6, we can basically play a Scheveningen setup. Basically Karpov loved to play this because white has a lot of space here and black is a bit pressed. And if white ever gets to activate this knight into the game, he will have a very nice position. So after that, against the Taimanov, we want to play knight b5, the Karpov attack. Okay, if in this position a6, the Paulsen, what we want to do is play the bishop d3 attack. And the point is that we have the very nice plan of playing queen to e2, followed by c4, setting up this bind, and then after long castle we have a very nice space advantage and control of the center. So for example, after knight f6, castle, queen c7, queen e2, d6, c4, we have white has reached the ideal setup against the Paulsen. And if, for example, in this position, bishop c5, because black has played e6 to be able to get this bishop out, we just play knight b3, and then basically the same setup. And then we can even exchange this bishop, or this bishop exchanges itself at some point against our dark squared bishop, and then it's not clear why black has played e6, moved the bishop over here, and then exchanged it. And the other point is that bishop d3 also is against this opening up bishop, because we don't play knight c3. So black wants to play here knight f6, attacking this pawn, and we are protecting this pawn with the bishop rather than with the knight, which was kind of like black's point that he could then pin this knight. So bishop d3 also just leaves the knight where it is, kind of asking the question, okay, why did you play e6 to open up your bishop here? So against the Paulsen, we want to play bishop d3, and then the other system in the e6 systems is not the Taimanov, not the Paulsen, but instead knight f6, attacking the pawn, and then we protect the pawn. And then here there are some move order variations, but basically the main system here is knight c6, in which case again we want to play a setup with knight d to b5, which forces black to play d6, and after knight f4, e5 we have transitioned to the Sveshnikov, which is in my opinion a very good opening against black for white. So in the 4 knights variation we want to transform in the Sveshnikov, and if after knight f6, knight c3, black plays the so-called pin variation, what we want to remember is to play e5, immediately asking the question to this knight, and the knight goes to goes either back, which is good for us, or goes to d5, attacking and putting pressure here on the c3 knight. If the knight went here, we would win like this immediately. So after knight d5, we want to play bishop d2, and after this exchange here we play, that's important, b takes c, after which the bishop goes back, and we take advantage of the fact that this bishop is not protecting this pawn anymore, but black has not castled, so and if black castles, we basically win the exchange by force. Okay, so that was the pin variation, and again in the e6 systems we have the Taimanov, where we want to play the Karpov, the Paulsen where we play bishop d3, the four knights variation where we want to transition the Sveshnikov, and the pin variation where we want to play e5. And so we looked at the d6 systems, we looked at the e6 systems. The last remaining setup of systems is the knight c6 systems. And here we basically want to look at two core systems. One is the accelerated dragon, where black after d4, c takes, knight takes, where black plays g6, and the point is that black has not yet played d6 and wants to play d5 in one move. So remember, in the dragon we had played bishop c4 against d5, and this resource would not be available to us anymore. But basically what we want to do against that is to play c4 immediately. So we just say, okay, your point was to play d5 in one move, but you know what? Because you have not played knight f6, which would have forced us to play knight c3 blocking this pawn, we are playing c4 immediately and taking control of the square in this way. And then the game just continues. So this is called the Maroczy bind, and after bishop g7, bishop e3, we can set up like this. With the Maroczy bind, we castle short, put the bishops like this, and the queen goes up, and we have very comfortable play. So that's the accelerated dragon, and the other system is the Sveshnikov, where after knight f6, knight c3, e5, knight bd5, eyeing the square. So after e5 we reach the Sveshnikov. If black immediately plays e5, it's the Kalashnikov, it's very similar. And in this position we want to play knight b5 to eye the d6 square, forcing black to play d5. Then we want to pin this knight, bishop g5. Black pushes back the knight, we go to a3, looks a bit funny, but that's no problem, because after b5 we can move the knight in here, taking advantage of the square on d5. And after bishop e7 we want to take the knight, important. And after bishop takes, not retake with the knight, because the knight is just fine here, but we want to play c3, allowing this knight to transition over into the game and using this knight to control the d5 square, and at the same time also taking away the d4 square from black. And after castles, knight c2, g5, bishop g5 is the main line. Black maybe wants to keep this bishop and also control this square, so the knight cannot go here. And now the last move to remember is a4. So before moving this bishop and castling, we want to immediately attack this structure here, which is giving us a very strong attack. So in the Sveshnikov we want to take advantage of the d5 square, and we want to play against this pawn chain here. And then maybe later in the game this will also become a weakness. So in my opinion this is a very good setup for white. Okay, so thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you got a good overview of systems that you can play with white against the Sicilian. See you next time.